All right, thank you all for coming. I'd like to call the meeting to order at 6:34. And I think we're going to do a few things that aren't actually on the agenda. We have some boxes up here we need to,
So we have
Claire?
3 people that we would like to stand, one being Mr. Garland next to me.
Stan.
Stand with you for us. Be recognized. Scott Embry and Michael Lee. Over 6 years for.
Has it only been 6?
I know it feels like forever, but it's been a quick 6 years. And we have something, a little token of the appreciation of the school committees, the administration, for everything that you have done, not only for the school committees, but for the residents of
Thank you
Sherborn
so
and
much.
students. Thank
All right, thank you. And I think we're going to get Angie from our committee on the phone. She had an accident where she can't move around too much. She broke her ankle in like a number of places. So somebody's going to call her?
I'm actually gonna, Tom suggested that I text her.
And just to make sure she, because
And what?
That she's ready?
Well, and see, right, yeah, how much she,
Well, we need to announce that she will be participating by phone.
Oh, I thought I just did that.
Yeah, so that's all we
we're
need.
gonna just check and make her, see what her interest
All right, so you guys do that
Oh.
while we.
Okay.
Well, were we expecting it to be high?
Do we need more?
I will dial whenever you need me to, otherwise we'll leave it.
You okay? Text her. So at some point we'll die. Well, we want
We
to
can announce her phone number on television so everyone can hear it.
Okay. All right. And why don't you? do this? So
The same.
Andrew has an announcement.
Yes, while we're getting that worked out, I just wanted to announce to all 3 committees that the good news that Don Fattori actually got the notice from the Department of Ed.
Here. Congratulations.
That they've denied her for her license. Only kidding. She did a great job in that process and went through a panel review, which is an especially hard process for licensure, and passed with flying colors. Actually got a handwritten note from the acting commissioner of education in Massachusetts, which is saying something. And with that having been addressed, and as planned and discussed in your June meeting, I have actually made the decision to appoint Don as the official business administrator for Dover-Sherborn in accordance with the contract discussed in the spring.
yeah.
So I just want to let you guys know.
No more intro.
Congratulate.
Yeah.
All right. We normally have a place for community comments, don't we? We don't have that, but are there any community comments before we get started? Okay. So I'll turn it over to you, Dr.
Okay.
Kia, with the strategic plan.
Excellent. So, I
We have
have
slides.
If it's okay, we're actually gonna turn the light.
Is that a mic?
So let me just say in advance, I apologize, because I guarantee I'm gonna turn my back on someone. Because we have the camera here and the screen here. And, but as you know, really, one of my major priorities this year was to build a strategic plan for the public schools of Dover-Sherborn. And it started in the summer, actually, with my entry meetings, of which there were over 70, countless.
Andrew, if you stand right there, maybe you're in
Is that better?
the screen and then you're not,
I like it.
you don't have to flip around that
Is
much.
that okay? Perfect. Okay, so, anyway, We did a lot of work. Let's move to the next slide. We did a lot of work. I had my entry meetings. There was a complete data review, and by that I mean looking at some of our statistics and our performance through the years. I did as deep a dive as I felt like I could in my first 3 months in the job. And thus far, we've been able to complete a mission statement, a theory of action, and core values. The mission statement we basically carried forward. And I did this work with the leadership team. That's important to mention. This was not done in isolation. I gathered the information, but what I did with that information was share it with the leadership team and try and hone it into kind of our big areas of focus. So our raw data, our raw findings and data were synthesized and reviewed by the leadership team and categorized into these big buckets, which are really our strategic objectives. The draft of the strategic plan framework and some sample objectives were shared with all of you back in January. So that's where we were when we left our last time we met. So you remember this document. We made a few tweaks, really just some minor changes. Remove the word "our" in one instance, our faculty and staff, and a couple of things like that, but really nothing substantive. So really what we've done is we've moved from having this vision or mission and our core values. We want this to drive our strategic objectives, which are really those 5 big areas, which under each of them are strategic priorities, which we'll show you tonight, which then lead to action steps, which we've incorporated in this. That was not part of the plan. The plan was we were going to work on the action steps this summer at the leadership retreat. We actually have gotten further along than we thought, and that's a tribute again to the leadership team. So all of this is a kind of a regular process. It should be an annual process. We don't want a strategic plan that just goes in the file cabinet and sits there for 10 years. We want it to be something that we refer back to. One of the things that one of your former superintendents did that I thought was pretty cool was highlight on agendas when we were actually working on items that were related to the strategic plan. I think that makes a lot of sense. So this is that last page. Can we just go back to that? Sorry, the one before. Sorry, shoot, figures. This page and then the one we were just on before are the two, so you can go back, are the two that will be really our strategic plan. One consists of that cover page and the other consists of these strategic priorities. And these are some of the things that we've been working on. So we'll go through these as quickly as I can. And basically, the first one, they're color-coded, so you can see hopefully which column they're under. Our first one is innovative teaching and learning, and our priorities that we've identified are as follows. Reestablish a pre-K to 12 academic excellence committee to research cutting-edge practices and trends in both industry and education across the state, nation, and world. And you can see under there are some action steps that we would like to work toward. We will also have under this category, provide professional development activities that foster innovative teaching practices. Our third bullet under our third strategic priority, I should say, is strengthen current curriculum and teaching methods by building upon identified best practices. And fourth, broaden the use of technology to better prepare students for a continually advancing workforce. So this stems from people saying to me, we know we're a strong system. We know we do a lot right. We perform very well. But it's easy for a strong system like ours to become complacent, quite honestly. We can say, we're great, so why do we need to continue to work at it? But the fact of the matter is, we do compete. We compete, we want our kids to be able to compete when they get out of high school. So we need to make sure that the experiences they have here are on the cutting edge. That in fact, we know that the programs and offerings and learning experiences are on the front edge. That's our goal. So that's why this became a strategic objective. That's why we have those 4 priorities under there. And I prefer not to go through each of the action steps, but I'm happy to answer questions perhaps when we get to the end. And that way we can kind of consolidate all of that at once. So the next slide is about our second strategic objective, which is health and well-being of students and staff. You know as well as I do, this is actually a national issue. The country is talking about the well-being of our kids, and what are we doing to make sure that our kids are mentally, physically healthy? You know, this is something that you have to be conscious of. It's not, you don't just leave this to chance. We have to have actions in place that constantly push us to take care of our kids. And so I heard that a lot. It was clear this was a priority. In processing it with the leadership team, we came up with the following 3 priority actions, strategic priority actions. 1, to focus on the social, emotional, and physical well-being of all students. All students being a key phrase there. Provide experiences to support the social emotional needs of staff. And the 3rd one, review school schedules for opportunities which further support the health and well-being of students. This is a goal that I don't think is going away anytime soon. And just because it doesn't mention something like cell phones, doesn't mean that's not something that we would be looking at. All of these things fall into the category, social media. All of these, the social experience for kids, all of these things are considerations when we're talking about the social emotional well-being of kids. And in terms of faculty, the pressure on faculty, on teaching staffs has increased incredibly in just the time period that I've been in education. The expectations, the standardization of their evaluations, there's a lot of pressure on teachers, and it feels heavy at times, and we need to take care of our teachers. I've said many times that happy kids are productive kids. Well, the same thing holds true for teachers. So we identify that as a priority. The next strategic objective was the partnerships with families and communities. And under this particular objective, we listed 2 priorities. Continually investigate and implement system-wide communication systems that reach families in a timely, professional, and uniform, streamlined fashion. I know that's somewhat wordy, but the point is, with all of the communication and information coming out of any organization, it's important that it be pulled together somehow, and that it not be repetitive. Any of us who've been parents in the Dover-Sherborn school system know there are times when you get a lot of email messages, and it can be overwhelming, frankly, if you have kids in a couple of different schools. It's hard to keep track of it all. So we know we need to look at that and make sure that how we're communicating is as effective and streamlined as possible. I also feel strongly, just tapping a little bit into the action steps, feel strongly that there should be some kind of formal communication coming from the central office. So that's a personal goal for me, and it's a priority for me, because I think people have said to me, frankly, they appreciate when they get a message from the superintendent. They like to know what's kind of on my mind and what I'm focusing on. So that's going to be a priority for us. The second one, collaborate and support the work of Challenge Success and other parent and community-related groups in providing educational and networking opportunities for parents and staff. So in talking about this, we realize that we're not all equipped with the same skill set. as teachers, as administrators, and as parents. Parents do need some support. They've said it before, we've identified it here in our system, and you should be proud of yourselves for doing that. Challenge Success is really about looking at parenting and teaching, and how can we work together to ensure that the experience for our kids is doable and positive. So, but we think there could be more work there. We think there could be more work. In my mind, I think about, geez, when I was a young parent, I wish I had the opportunity to speak to some of these veteran parents, because they've been through it, maybe with 3 or 4 kids, and survived. Whereas when we were first breaking out as parents, it was kind of scary. So this is something that could potentially come from this. The next strategic objective was safe and innovative facilities. We have 2 priorities under that. One is to continue to update systems and structures to ensure the safety of the school community. So that's a priority, right? It should be a priority in any school anyhow. I was once told in my education classes, the first thing that you should state as your priority as a school leader is the safety of the kids. And it really is true. And it came forth many times over in my interviews. People want us to make sure that their kids are kept safe, not just physically, but safe in many ways. So psychologically safe, it matters. It clearly matters. If you think about some of the things that have gone on in our country in the past few months, psychological safety is something that every school should be listing as a priority. So we want to make it a focus for us continually. We also want to review, realign, and upgrade spaces to support 21st century learning. So we have to continually look at our facilities and make sure that the spaces that we're using are the best they can be. And if they're not, or if we need to consolidate or reconfigure, then we should look at that. So that's another thing that was important to people. The last objective was resource efficiency, as you know, because I went through it before. So maximize sharing of special education staff, resources, programming across the system, and continue to refine the FY15 special ed reorganization. Continuously review current and projected special education needs across the system and develop in-district educational programming and protocols to reduce or eliminate out-of-district placements. Our third priority, ensure effective and efficient use of resources, investigate additional sources of revenue or cost-saving measures annually as part of the budget development process. So we understand, we've heard it. In the administration, we've heard it. From the leadership team, we've heard it. And all of us in this room, anyone who's on the school committees, definitely has heard that our being efficient and responsible with our resources is important. Yes, we absolutely have a priority of making sure that the learning experiences are the best we can provide. But we also know that we have a responsibility to make sure that we're doing it in as efficient a manner as possible. So that's really what this is about. Looking at the special education delivery of services is something that's hugely important in this process, not simply because of the money that can be saved, but really to make sure that we're meeting the needs of a broader range of kids than most people think. When you're teaching a class of 22 kids, you're guaranteed to have a real spectrum of kids. It's actually easier to teach kids who are at the higher end because they're driven, self-motivated, whereas if you get into a middle-level class, you're going to have kids who are probably capable of achieving at those higher levels, and then kids who need a little more support, maybe a lot more support. And if you have a real spectrum, it can be a challenge. That means we need to make sure that the teachers have the tools, the training to accommodate these different kinds of learners. And we have many different kinds of learners in the system. Because when you don't, those kids can become disenfranchised, feel like I don't really have a bright future because I can't keep up. Their parents can be discouraged, become discouraged and say, this isn't a system for us. And frankly, I think we lose a lot of good people because we aren't necessarily able to adapt our ways. So we need to constantly do that. And that is not to say that our teachers aren't doing their best now. They are, but there's always ways that we can improve. So we've committed ourselves to continually looking at that. And that's really what this one is about. So really the next steps this evening, I'm hoping that the school committees will approve, again, those two sheets, really the mission, the theory of action, the core values, the strategic objectives, and the strategic priorities. So again, the strategic priorities on those color-coded sheets that I just went through are really the bold print sections. The bullets are more like action steps. Those we're going to continue to work on this summer. I'd like to begin sharing the strategic plan with the entire school community this spring. And then this summer, again, work with the leadership team to prioritize those action steps, set some timelines, set some benchmarks, assign some responsibilities. Who's going to do what? What can we accomplish? If you start to look at these action steps, there's a lot there. It's a lot. So we want to make sure that we're not going a mile wide and an inch deep, so that we're focusing on things that we know we can handle in 1 year. As we look at this annually, we may find there's no way we're going to get to this. So that one's going to have to be pushed for a year. I mean, that happens with goal setting. So, but I think, you know, in talking with the leadership team, we think this is going to be a good process. I think it's going to be really helpful to the principals every year to know what it is we're working on. There's nothing worse as a school leader, as a building leader, to find out after you've just set the goals for your school that actually the district's going to be working on 10 new goals that they had no idea were coming. That's really tough for a principal. So this allows the principals to keep their eyes on the prize and for all of us to be pulling in the same direction. So that's one of the big benefits from doing this. In the fall, I'd like to come back and share with the school committees what our kind of action steps broken out and prioritized look like. And then in the spring of next year, we go through this again, of revisiting this document and having an update of kind of where we are. And then we just keep this rolling. So that's really where we're at. So I've said it already, but I really do want to thank the leadership team who've really taken this process very seriously and taken this challenge on. When they could have easily kind of gone through the motions, they did not. They embraced this challenge. It's a real credit to them that they're reflective people, that they think about their work, and that they know the importance of this work and are continually challenging ourselves. So I want to thank those guys. Some of them are here tonight, so thank you for coming, guys. And with that, I'd like to move to questions. I guess I could sit for that.
Oh, wait.
Definitely not.
No sleeping.
I look so good.
The AR. Okay, so there are no questions?
No, I think they're made.
You're gonna take.
waiting for
I was going to take them here.
Okay, waiting for the light, sure.
So I have a couple of just quick ones, and I realize this is part of the action steps, so it's something that you work towards in the summer. But I assume that you'll talk about how you measure progress or movement towards goals, and also who owns the action steps, so that it's clear where if there are questions who you would go to, or who's taking charge of that.
Yes,
Yeah.
so I should have included the slide that I showed in January that actually gave an example of an action step, and it mentions the timeline, and kind of what our expected outcomes might be. So it might be 50% of the recommendations of the audit would be in place by such and such date, or something to that effect, something that's measurable, and also attaching to each of those action steps people who are responsible. Sometimes it's many of us, and
Yeah.
sometimes it's more of a assistant superintendent or superintendent or business administrator or high school only. So it really depends, but that will definitely be our goal for the work this summer, and that's what we would share with you in the fall.
Three things. First of all, I love how you call us veteran parents and not old parents. Second, I think the bullet point around making sure that the core values are integrated into everything is really important, because everyone in this district, including the 16 class, should be able to say off the top of our heads what those core values are, and what from elementary school up to high school. So I assume that'll be part of the communication plan, but I definitely think since it's so baked into everything here, that we don't lose the words, so that people really internalize it. And then the last, as you're developing the next steps, especially on the first objective around innovative teaching and learning, is how we hold the team accountable, because there's a lot of great suggestions in here, but I'll be really focusing on when you come back with measurements and who's responsible, because it's one thing to offer all that, and it's another thing to hold people accountable for cultural or curriculum changes. Because we have a incredibly talented and tenured faculty, so some of these things might be big changes, and so how do we hold what is already a great team accountable for becoming even better?
So, you know, it's some of these things are going to be hard to prove, just like, you know, sometimes qualitative research. My dissertation was on student voice, and I was trying to prove that giving students a voice in the leadership of the school system, of their building, would actually impact their feelings of motivation and being part of the school. But somebody could clearly say, well, you can't really measure that sense of motivation. How can you prove that they were motivated? So I could survey them and ask them, do you feel more motivated? And they could say, yes, I do. And so in qualitative research, you're allowed that wiggle room. Those who are quantitative researchers don't like it. But I actually believe there's a balance in there. Some of it is truly quantitative and easily measurable. Some of the statistics that we'll hear about, for example, in the Challenge Success Survey, some of those things you could actually ask again and expect to see the needle move, right? So that's very quantitative. Other things might not be as easy. But that's really our challenge with the action plan this summer, to put together steps that hold us accountable.
Great.
Hi there.
This is great, thank you. I especially appreciate that you're committed to continually looking at SPED and special ed, and that you appreciate the broad range of kids that are coming through our school system. And I was just wondering if some of the programs that we have, for example, our connection with Landmark, we spend a decent amount of money on that. Is that only in this section that's for resource efficiency, or where would I look to that if that's represented someplace else?
You know what, it's a good question, Laurie, and what we were thinking was, it's really a twofer, because it's about improving teaching and ensuring that our programs are relevant and truly beneficial to our kids. But when we were looking at it, it's you know, when we look at special education and make sure that our programming is consistent, for example, from one school to the next, or from one grade to the next, like from 5th to 6th, or from 8th to 9th. When we look at that, we're not only looking at the quality of the learning experience, but if it ends up being a really solid learning experience, well, that will have a financial benefit as well, because we'll be less likely to have kids or families saying, my kid can't make it here. So it really does fall mostly under resource efficiency, but it's not that it's just about saving money. It's just, we just didn't put it, we would have basically been saying the same thing under kind of innovative teaching. Good question. I can, and we could talk about adjusting that. If you think that that's something that really should be mentioned in both.
Something to think about.
Definitely something to think about.
Right, explicit versus implicit.
Right,
Yeah.
Okay.
I have other people still have one, you want to go?
Maybe at the risk of intentionally stepping on a political third rail. Question of regionalization and resource efficiency, both administrative resource, which is a burn with 3 school committees, separate health insurance to negotiating with towns, busing savings or revenues that come in. Is that something that was considered? Is that something you got feedback on and thought about putting in for study purposes? And looking at, does this make sense to even look at and perhaps affect sometime in the out years?
Great question, Michael. And a bold question. Because I think it's been discussed at various times in the past, should we be regionalized with one school committee from K to 12? A conversation I think has been had a few times. It did come up in my interviews. I wouldn't say it was an overwhelming number of people, so I kind of felt like it's one of those things that probably should be looked at in the future, but not necessarily in our first go-round with this. And that's why I didn't include it. I don't know. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking mindful of the fact that a study is quite a long process. And then once there's a conclusion, building consensus is quite a long process. If it's okay, let's put this out for 3 years from hence, then you're starting to count 3 years from now, and even studying the issue, which perhaps the conclusion is that really doesn't make sense. So why not get an earlier start on that, knowing that it's a multi-year process in the best of circumstances?
I think it makes sense because it seems like it hasn't been discussed in my 6 years here and 2 years paying attention prior to that. It wasn't discussed on my committee.
On Valerie's strategic goals. I was on that committee for expense efficiency and.
Not in my,
No, it's been discussed in my time, and I've been 7.
you were here.
Yeah.
No, you're 2 years longer
We
than
had
me.
Carolyn White from Dover chaired that.
I've never heard a discussion about it, but in terms of resource efficiency, whenever we talk about costs and why we spend more money on administration and other things than other districts, I've always heard, well, it's because we're a region. So it seems like it would make sense. And when you mention it, people say, oh, they kind of roll their eyes. It's like start times or something else like that. It just seems like it makes sense to understand that. When we're doing superintendent searches, we hear that having 3 committees is
No, we
a
don't.
problem.
No,
No,
we
we
don't. No, we don't.
That was talked about a lot. Whether
It was
the candidates.
hypothesized on our part.
Right.
It was not talked about by candidates.
And I believe the reality was,
I understood, but didn't we hear that from, who was the gentleman that was helping us, Tony?
Tony Bent?
Yeah.
What was your perception on
We
that?
heard it from Tony.
On the 3, since you were here, so you know as a school committee member for, I guess, one term.
But not to get too deep into that, I'm just
Yeah.
saying, it makes sense to consider it. I haven't heard it discussed in any detail in my time here. And if you're talking about resource efficiency here, that was part of it. It was certainly discussed, but I also have heard from administration, when you talk about cost, is because we're a region, even though it's easy to say, but it's never been shown. So why not just have it as something that can be discussed?
Well, I'd like to take the other sort of lens on that situation, and so a couple of things to your points. When I think about a school system and whether we are a region or whether or not we are like our separate situations, I'm confused as to where our administrative overlap actually is. Like whose job would be eliminated if we were all one region, right? Like we'd still need principals and assistant principals at all the schools, we'd want them, right? Because I mean, looking at the size of the different schools, it would still warrant that. And we have, it looks like, I mean, before I've come to the meeting, they've done that whole reorganization around special education, looks to have maximized the roles so that they're being shared over the districts. So I don't necessarily think that there would be a cost savings, but I do think from, just being a resident here for the past 10 years, that we're talking about a massive hole of culture differences between the two communities for lots of historical things that certainly predate my life. And just looking at these action steps, which I think are really important and actionable, I fear that if our leadership's attention is drawn to that, or, and I appreciate studies, and, I do, but, that's a consulting group, and that's another $10,000, or, like, you have to hire a person to do a study, or else we have to pay our people time to do a study. And I would just rather see some forward motion on the actual action steps before because I wonder, I am skeptical about the efficiencies that would be gained.
Sure. Well, that's why it makes sense to have it as part of this, as to saying, no, it's not going to make it more efficient. We don't need to study it. I don't know. When I used to look at all the expenses and how much we spend on administration and things like that, we spend more
Is it
than other
higher
towns.
than other similarly sized high-performing school systems?
Yeah.
Really?
I haven't looked at it in the last 3 years.
There's duplicate accounting procedures and payroll procedures.
But-
Some of the costs is over.
So, but I think it's even getting into the weeds of.
Out there, and it's reason to study
But
it.
Okay.
You know,
can I
do
say
think
it all?
it's
So,
given my
well, we don't, I don't think we need to have a discussion about regionalization tonight. The point is whether it needs to be part of thinking about resource efficiency, right? So you might be able to tell from these opinions that it might be something that's worth looking at. To say that, we've looked at it before, we've looked at start times before too, and that was, we voted against that. It doesn't mean you don't go back and look at it or consider it, right? So, but if we're going to approve this tonight, I don't know that we need to make a wording change, do we, before we approve it, or do we?
I would say if you want something like that, these committees have to give me that direction.
So is that, from your perspective, is that something so what I would propose also, and your point is really well taken around, hey, are we spending the limited financial resources and human resources in the proper place, given new senior administrators and the strategic plan? I would propose that folks who raise their hand and say, hey, I have time, I have inclination, at least to get a ball rolling to see if it makes sense to go further. There are a lot of volunteers in the respective communities that could carry a lot of water a certain way before it needs to take up any financial resources or human resources within the school system.
Can I just speak, having been on that goal under Valerie and sat on that committee that looked at efficiencies, and regionalization was one of them, and having seen the work that was done by Georgia Durr and that school committee before, there's information somewhere around available to everyone. It's not only our desire about efficiencies, it's what Maggie touches on, the political climates of the two towns, and can you get the two towns to the table to have a discussion? When it was reviewed, when Valerie Spriggs was here, the savings were not significant, and the amount of time, energy, work that would go into a campaign basically to promote regionalization in two towns, get two town meetings to approve it, versus the time available to make significant strides in educational issues, it never got any further, because at that point in time, the political climate wasn't such that there was an appetite.
Did that study look at pension costs?
I don't recall myself.
Because both the town of Dover and the region incur a significant penalty for our pensions for support staff because we're part of Norfolk that would not occur if somehow we were able to reincorporate Dover and Middlesex County. And that's a
Right, so
very
no, changing the location,
identifiable hard
changing the
dollar.
location of the region head office was not.
Could you change the location of the region, given that the regional school system's in Dover? Would that be a?
No, I mean, once you fully regionalize between both towns, you gotta create a lawyer to do it for you. And that's the,
But I think the real
I mean, those are
question,
some of the things that should be on the
the
table
real
and
question
studied and
in
not
the
ruled
short
out
term-
with real money.
the real question before us in the short term is where would we like our superintendent to spend his time and the time of the leadership?
Yeah, but this is a
One other thing that needs to
big
be-
presentation. This is just one of many things. Just recognizing the fact that there may be something there seems like what we're talking about.
I also think that the alternative of not starting to act as a cohesive K-12 system is growing to the schools. And I think it's specifically around healthcare, and having been involved in it now for this entire year and had plenty of conversations with people on both sides of the river, I think the only way we're going to get back to a cohesive benefit structure for all of our teachers and all our administrators is if we do regionalize and we own this decision independent of our two towns. And if the goal is to try to get our teachers and our administrators back on one single health plan, that too alone is going to be a time sum trying to coordinate, cajole, whatever our two other municipalities that we're on hook for. Or alternatively, we just go to separate contracts and we don't pretend to our employees to be a K-12 system. Because this is just something that, I just don't think that we're gonna be in the
I'd like to-
environment to bring the towns back together.
One second. I'd like to move on. There'll be other times to add this. I think it's an important point. I understand what you're saying, but I don't think we know unless we look at it. And to that point, I don't have a lot of confidence in what previous superintendents oversaw. But there'll be other time to add this. It could be added any time. If people wanted to bring it up, they could add that to it as people roll off.
Well, if this is revisited every year, then you could conceivably have the conversation.
I think so, but I think your point is important. I think we dismiss it too easily. So we don't know, but we don't need to debate it tonight. Yes.
So I just wanted, feel a bit redundant after what you just said, but it's clearly an important question. I think Michael's point's very well made. Since I've been around it, there's never been, I haven't seen any proper discussion. But I wanted to suggest that we perhaps find agenda time for it at a subsequent meeting to have a media discussion on this, because out of respect for the 70 meetings and the coding of the importance of the issues that were raised, the superintendent didn't consider it worthy to put in now. So
Right.
I think that's, if we concentrate on what we have in front of us now, but have agenda time for this.
Can I add one more point quickly?
Sure.
Hopefully you don't look at this and say, well, what about such and such? That's not on here. That doesn't mean we can't work on other things. Just these are the things that we've clearly identified, but we're always, the principals are always looking at their buildings, and there might be something unique to their building. So we're always going to be working on these things. This is an ongoing process. So that is true. It did not make it into my original recommendations for you to consider tonight.
It would have been odd if one of your recommendations was to regionalize.
Maybe not, if you hear from a lot of people.
Greg,
That doesn't mean it's worthwhile, though. So,
I just got one non-regionalization question.
Okay.
So I just, two quick questions and then one hurrah. It was great to see on the health and being the mention of possible advisor is the student, deepening student-adult relationships. I thought that was inspirational to hear or read. My two questions are regarding the innovative teaching and learning points. The portrait of a graduate. Could you just maybe spend 30 seconds just talking a little more about that, given the fact we have such a broad range of different types of students? Does the portrait of a graduate, is it refer more to the tools that we hope a graduate has when they leave, or how do you see that?
I think it refers mostly to what do our students need to know or be able to do when they graduate into this world and even 10 years from now. So jobs are changing, technology is changing. So it's really about identifying what we think our graduates have to have in order to be successful in this ever-changing world. Does that capture it, Beth?
I think so, balancing the content and the skills, and then, we do a fairly good job, and we'll continue to look at the alignment of content K through 12, but I think it's looking at those skills K through 12, and then as we go back and reassess the curriculum and teaching and learning every year, making sure that we're balancing both.
And then just the very last question was the action point of expanding STEAM teaching, without sounding too overly concerned. When you expand time allocated to subjects group A, I'm imagining you either create more time or you take time away from subjects group B. And I just wondered how you thought that expansion might work.
That is a really good question. It's a tough one. It's a tough question. I just read a good piece about that. Somebody arguing that STEAM takes away from the more important thing of the humanities. So this goes back and forth. I do think that with the way that technology is moving, we need to continue to keep our eye on the STEAM ball. And we didn't say STEM, we said STEAM for a reason. Because the arts, we know, are essential. Building, supporting, continuing to believe in the arts, which I think we do a darn good job of, frankly, is important. I don't want to lose sight of that in this process. So that A should have an underline under it, because it is through this creativity that we take our kids to another level. So I don't think it's mutually exclusive. I don't think we're just saying, let's just concentrate on STEAM. We're saying, let's make sure that we're not losing sight of STEAM. For example, design thinking. Our kids should be well-versed in design thinking. But I bet you if I asked them if they were, they might not be. And that's not good. Design thinking it's pretty common now in schools. It's come out of Stanford. It's an accepted way of problem solving in groups. And our kids should be well-versed in that. So that's something that shows up in another place, but same thing holds true for STEAM. There are certain things that our kids need to be able to do, like program. They need those skills. They just do. It doesn't mean at the expense of everything else. Somehow in there, Adrian, I hope is the after balance.
Very good.
Are there any other non-regionalization questions?
I guess my comment is more around the process and maybe what I was expecting when first played out. My experience has been that during that evaluation phase that you guys dug into and, kind of do the root cause, understanding things going on in the district, that alone, you bring out of it kind of a study that talks about the good, the bad, and the ugly. And that's the tool to help inform what we're trying to accomplish with this strategic plan. And so I feel like, at least for the benefit of the school committee members, not seeing, again, what's working versus what people have some concerns with, and versus the things that you were truly surprised that we were not executing on. I think it was a miss for developing the organization and the right tools around delivering that type of analysis also then becomes the tools that you use when you walk around to get parents' attention and administrators, or not administrators since they're already involved, but other people in the school, teachers and support staff. I feel like right now there's not a lot of compass to this. It's hard for me, if somebody asked me, what's going on in the schools, how I would describe to them what we think we'll be in 3 years' time. Just because there's nothing extremely tangible here. It's very generalized at this point.
Can I respond to that?
Of course.
So, actually, a step that we took out, and quite honestly, it is in part a function of the fact that as a joint committee, we don't meet every month. And so one of the steps in this process that we left out was the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, a SWOT analysis, which is in fact exactly what you're talking about, Michael. But I would argue that's in fact what I did in synthesizing this data. I looked at the data and said, this is clearly a concern to a lot of people. So I guess perhaps I'm asking you to take a leap of faith because we didn't do the SWOT analysis. But I can tell you the last time I did a strategic plan, I did do a SWOT analysis, and I'm not sure that it was, that we got that much bang out of it, quite honestly. I understand the rationale for it because it seems more like a sequential step that's missing. People need to know, well, these were the things that were strengths, and these were the things that were weaknesses, and these were the things that were opportunities for us to work on, and these are the things that were really threatening. It helps to bring people along, but we actually streamlined that, quite honestly, out of it because of the way that we meet. That's the truth of that.
Which, again, I think is potentially a case for regionalization, if anything, because we don't get, I just think you can't cut something like that out and bring a board along. If any of these initiatives have a big dollar price tag to them, we're not equipped to sell that to the people we need to go sell it to. Because we can't say, well, we're here in the district, in the community, we're committed to get there. It just seems a part of the process again, I'm speaking from my own personal experience working in both the nonprofit and for-profit sectors. I've never been to a board situation like this where there wasn't the precursor of this is what we've learned about your organization with your management staff in this, this process. So,
Any other questions?
Maybe a point of clarification. Tonight, you're not seeking our approval on the action steps,
Right.
correct?
Correct.
So this is more, you're providing these to us as a more of a pull ahead. Hey, look what we've done. We've actually made progress. So I think what I'm hearing especially from the regionalization, perhaps as your team continues to develop the action steps, that regionalization, the question of regionalization or studying some part thereof should be included in those action steps. I think it's not something that's very specific, and that isn't something that should be in. It can very easily be categorized into the objectives and the priorities.
I guess I honestly, Scott, don't see that as the administration's decision. I really don't. I think, I agree that this is up to the towns ultimately, and it would need to be, the school committee's made a determination that this is something that needs to be done. And if the school committee said that to me, then yes, I'll put it in as an action step, but I didn't include it.
Right. But again, we're not approving the action steps tonight.
No, that's
So
correct.
this is something that can be appropriately.
You could have further conversation
Added in.
when we,
Okay.
yes, you could
Just,
definitely.
okay, another one of clarification. What are we actually approving?
The priorities.
You're approving the bold printed priorities. on-
This?
No.
You're approving that page and that page. These are actually these bold steps here, Greg. All here, so underneath innovative teaching and learning are the priorities.
Okay, so what's the language for the motion?
To accept the,
The strategic
Strategic plan
priorities
update?
and priorities, correct?
the strategic plan update and priorities, yes.
Is that clear to everybody?
That would
Okay.
include the objectives and the priorities, essentially.
Okay, any other questions? Refresh my memory?
I will
Motion and second for
motion
each,
at the region.
for each one, and then we vote after it all?
Follow-ups.
So I'll invite a motion at the region to approve the strategic plan update and priorities.
So moved.
Second? Thank you.
Adrian?
Just copying down what I just said.
Okay.
Motion from the Dover School Committee to approve the strategic plan updates and priorities.
So moved.
Thank you, Henry.
Second.
Second, Michael.
Sherborn School Committee, same motion?
Second?
Yeah.
First?
Okay, she moved in a second. All right, great. The vote?
Technically, you should
A discussion?
welcome more discussion.
What- Any discussion?
Hearing no discussion at the
Yeah.
region, I will call for a vote. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining?
Any
Thank you.
discussion in Dover? Thank you. All those in favour? Aye. Thank you.
Sherborn, any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? He's not here. Okay, great, carries. All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for your hard work. Go get it. A lot of work.
Okay, item 3 on the agenda, the Challenge Success Survey update. Who is doing that?
3 of us.
Oh, my word.
John Smith.
Do we have any?
And Ellen Shag.
Okay. We don't have any.
They're not.
Okay.
All right, well, I'll begin. Welcome, and thank you for having us. We are now in our fourth full year of Challenge Success K-12. As some of you know, Challenge Success was a program that initiated and was developed first for secondary schools. And fortunately for us at Dover-Sherborn, we came together and decided that we wanted to make this a K-12 initiative. And early on, there were some challenges to that. There were some things we had to work through, but it actually has really benefited us as a region, simply because we've been able to work with all of our children and our staff and our community members all through pre-K to 12. And I was fortunate enough to be part of that first training group, and we were just recalling that the other day, that how excited and inspired we were when we came back from that initial conference out at Stanford, and to this day still remain very, very confident of the program, what it can offer to us, what it has offered to us, and what it can do for our children and ultimately the success of our communities. And we have now gone through 2 sets of survey results. When we first began this journey with Challenge Success, one of the first steps is we had to survey our students. We did that at the high school to get some baseline data, which was then compiled by the researchers and statisticians at Challenge Success to look at where were we in terms of statistically, where are we compared to some other Challenge Success schools. And as some of you may know, we were actually the only school east of Chicago when this first began, and there are now 10, something like that, possibly, right? At least 10. So for us, it was quite interesting to go out there and to meet similar types of high-achieving schools, affluent communities, supportive communities, and we came back and developed some plans. We formed our team. We then started with the mission of working with our educators first. We felt as though that was the first place that we needed to. And then coinciding with that, shortly afterwards, Pam Webb, our parent representative, has also taken the lead and has been instrumental in providing for a successful parent and community program as part of this program. And then ultimately, we have now started to funnel that down to our students. And I will be the first to tell you that we have much more work to do with our students with this. But we have first tackled it with some of the adults, our educators, our parents, our community members, because we felt as though it was really important that we all become educated and understand it so that we could impart that knowledge to our children. And thanks to the financial and emotional support from DSEF, as well as our anonymous donor, we've been able to now train 3 teams. We've been able to keep this program going for 4 years. We've maintained our relationship with Stanford University. We have also been able to have a coach each year, which has really been instrumental in helping, keeping the needle moving for us. one of the first things that they said to us when we went out there is, this is a long-term project. This isn't something that we will find a quick solution to and then we'll move on to the next thing. Instead, it really should be a way of thinking. And that's one of the things that we've done with Challenge Success is we look at all of our decisions that we make in terms of programming, in terms of assemblies, in terms of activities that we're going to have, professional development. We look at through the lens of Challenge Success and how do we redefine success? How do we also build resiliency within our students and in our community population? So what we're here tonight to present are some of the findings from the second round of our survey results, which kind of tell us, where are some areas that we've made some improvements, where are some areas that we need to continue to improve, and where are some areas that we now maybe need to target some of our focus on, because the information from our students is indicating that those are the areas that are of greatest concern compared to other like-minded schools, compared to national averages, et cetera. But we're really excited about Challenge Success, and we were talking about it. It will continue to be part of our focus, and it will be incorporated obviously into Dr. Keough's strategic plan. It will be in each of our building-based school improvement plans. But in some cases, it's not going to be its own heading. It may actually be integrated into social and emotional well-being. It may go into innovative teaching. It may go into resource efficiency. So if you do see some of those school-based goals and you don't see a separate heading for Challenge Success, just know that it's actually incorporated in. And I'll turn it over to Ellen now, who will talk maybe a little bit about some of the background and some of the progress we've made.
Sure, just to give you some background. So we're a 17-member interdisciplinary team. We've been lucky enough to send 2 full teams to Stanford to be trained. And the teams are made up of administrators, teachers, students, parents, and support staff such as guidance counselors, school adjustment counselors, and nurses. The team meets regularly in 2 different ways. We either meet as a full 17-person team to kind of check in on progress of what's been going on from month to month. And we also, this year, kind of instituted school-based teams over the past year. So the school-based team can focus on kind of, different initiatives within their own building. And then we kind of report out at our big meeting with the big group. We've been able to send almost the entire administrative team K-12 for training at Stanford, which has been great. And as Mr. Smith said, that's been possible by a grant from DSEF and a private donation, which we are beyond grateful for. Every year, we meet as a full team for a retreat in June, and that's where we really kind of hash out the priority areas coming up for the following school year. So that's what we'll be using this survey data for, is to go through it really with a fine-tooth comb and figure out where do we want to focus moving forward. The survey is one piece that helps us inform and measure the impact, but we also collect and rely on a good amount of qualitative data through different testimonials of parents, students, teachers, as well as a portion of the survey has qualitative questions as well that we, draw upon. And just to kind of share a few positive changes that have been noticed as effective by students before Pam jumps in with more of the concrete data. Students have found the following things to be effective over the past few years: changes to our mid-year exam schedule, earlier end time to extracurricular activities and evening events, changes in the way the teachers conduct their classes. They're finding more flexibility, increased awareness of stress, more mindfulness practices is being used in the classroom. They really enjoy homework-free weekends and even homework-free evenings, which some teachers institute every now and again. And the implementation of alternative assessments, project-based mid-years finals, or projects throughout the class, or projects in the class during the year as well. Over to Pam for a little more deeper dive.
First of all, I want to thank you all for, on behalf of everyone involved in Challenge Success, for this opportunity to share the survey results with you. It's actually been very exciting to see some of the changes that have occurred over the first 3 years of implementing the project. We're now in our 4th year, as John said, and we've seen we were able to document and note some very positive shifts in the data outcomes. So thrilled to share those with you tonight. You all should have received a copy of the executive summary in your packets. That is the complete quantitative trend analysis that is behind that executive summary. It is a much longer document, 8 or 9 pages, and that's a separate piece. Before we get into reviewing the specific findings, I just wanted to share a few overall insights with you to kind of help guide the discussion.
First of all, the Stanford survey really measures, this is focused on the high school, even though we have a K through 12. This survey results are just for the high school at this point in time. It measures the student perceptions in terms of 9 different areas. And that includes homework, extracurricular activities, sleep, physical health, stress, parent expectations, academic engagement, academic integrity, and teacher support. We're comparing 2 different points in time, as John mentioned, 2014, 2017, 2 different cohorts. There's 1 year of overlap with the two cohorts. Stanford has implemented this survey in 150 different school districts, so they're very well versed in doing it. They've done that since 2009, and the survey results have provided a lot of valuable information for school districts, both to find out what students see as challenging and stressful in their schools, as well as what are sources of support that exist within schools. As you will see tonight, that almost every indicator at DS has moving in the right direction, which is very encouraging given that this kind of change is incremental. So to see some of these indicators shifting over, even after just 3 years, is pretty incredible. So that's very, very encouraging. It is, a slow turning steamship, but it's important to keep in mind as we go through this that the work is not done, that we're still in progress, and even if we do see some positive results in certain areas. Also, for nearly every measure, DS compares very well to the national sample and to other similar profile schools. And the way they define the national sample, there are 66 other challenge success schools who have, high schools who have done this survey. Similar profile schools are ones that are public schools that they've pulled out that are similar size to us. So I have, in a few places, I'll note how we compare to some of those national standards. And you'll see as we go through, there are definitely some areas where we have made some positive movement changes and are doing well on a relative basis, but we still would like to improve further just to increase some of the absolute values. And I'll note those as we talk. I'm going to go over just a few of the highlights in the executive summary. And there's a lot of data there, or a lot of information there, and I'm happy to answer any questions that of issues that I don't particularly address in my comments. Okay, so for the first issue area around school stress and academic worry, this is probably the most significant in terms of challenge success goals, because that is the overarching goal, is to reduce stress and anxiety among our students. The student stress, as measured by how often students feel stressed over schoolwork, has decreased overall as a district, or over as a high school, with the 10th graders experiencing the biggest drop. The percentage of students who reported being often or always stressed by schoolwork has decreased from 78 to 72%. Also, academic worry, which is measured by how often students worry about academic-related issues like college acceptance, tests, performance on schoolwork, things that are going to happen in the future. The indicators on that has all decreased as well, the average worry levels, with 11th graders seeing the biggest drop. So these results they matter a lot, because this is one of the key outcomes of success for the initiative, to decrease the overall levels of stress and worry. So that's good news. Another area where we've seen some changes, Ellen alluded to some of these, are the student perceptions of how effective changes have been. Student voice is a high priority in challenge success. Throughout the entire project, we've labeled that as a priority. So when asked to what extent that students felt that they benefited from challenge success, almost 2/3, 63%, said that they had been positively affected by the program. And this was almost a year ago. Last spring is when they took the survey. Overall, students found that the majority of challenge success programming was effective, with a few specific changes topping the list. Ellen mentioned some of the changes to mid-year exams, earlier end times to extracurriculars and the sports, evening events, homework-free weekends, and alternative assessments. In the area of homework, that's the third category, challenge success has prioritized homework as an issue to focus on initially from our work at the get-go. Part of that came out of our Stanford process, where we identified that homework was a key root cause of stress here. So it was looking at both the quality and purpose of the homework in addition to the quantity of homework. So it wasn't just the amount, but also the meaning of the homework. We've seen positive results in student perceptions in both the quantity and the quality of homework. Fewer students have reported their classes assigning busy work. the number of students reporting too much homework has decreased. The number of students feeling that they have the right amount of homework has increased. And almost 50% of students feel that the majority of their homework is meaningful, which is actually a fairly high number. The one indicator on homework which it requires some more processing is that the students reported, when we asked students to report how much time they spent on homework, that number actually increased slightly. It went from 2.7 hours per night to 2.85. It's important to note here, however, that two things. One is that this is not an exact science. For students to self-assess how much time they spend on homework is a very difficult thing to do. There's a lot of overlap with other activities that they're doing, multitasking going on, a lot of social media breaks, or, you know, I don't know if they're breaks, but it's constant social media. So it's very hard for them to self-assess how much time they're spending on homework, and Challenge Success National recognizes that as well. So I'm not putting a lot of stock in these numbers. It matters much more to me what the student's perception of their homework is, which those are all the positive indicators. The other thing to note here about these numbers is that our numbers are very much in line with the national sample. We're actually slightly lower than national samples in terms of homework load. It's slightly, homework hours spent on homework, it's a little over 3 hours, where, like I said, ours is 2.85 now. And similar profile schools are in the same range. It's actually a fairly big range, but we're in the same range. So basically, we can conclude that the homework load is still heavy, but students are noticing a real improvement, and it's not out of line with comparable schools. Fourth area, teacher care and support. I could also classify this as climate of care. Students over the 3-year period have reported feeling more cared for and supported by their teachers, with 10th graders experiencing the biggest increase. Our overall levels of teacher support and caring are actually fairly high compared to other schools, which is great. And the students, as Ellen mentioned, perceive the teachers to be making positive changes in terms of being more flexible, more responsive to stress, introducing some mindfulness practices in the classroom. Just the way they operate in their classrooms is a little bit different. Another positive indicator was that there is a slightly higher percentage of students who report at least having one adult in the school that they can go to if they have a problem. It went from 69% to 72%. In context, this is slightly higher than the national sample and slightly lower than similar profile schools, which suggests that there is some room for improvement. Even more important, though, on an absolute value basis, if you think about 72% of students having an adult they can go to, if you flip it, that means that 28% do not have an adult in the school that they think they can go to if they have any problems. So this may be an area that we want to target in light of school safety discussions and building connections within the school. In terms of student engagement, this was another primary area for Challenge Success in its stated goals to look at engagement in terms of measuring the effort that students are putting into schoolwork, how much they're enjoying their work, and whether they're finding it valuable or useful. Good news is, almost all of these measures of engagement have increased over the 3 years, with over 1/3 of our students feeling very purposely engaged and another 1/5 fully engaged. So on all of these measures, we actually compare, we fare very well compared to other schools. The only area where we had an indicator that didn't change much, it was a very, very slight increase, was in the percentage of students who were, quote, doing school. And the way that Challenge Success defines this is students that are often or always working hard, but rarely, if ever, finding their schoolwork interesting, that fun, or valuable. So in this regard, it is something that we want to pull out and note, because we don't want 40% of those students just kind of slogging through. And we processed this a little bit with Challenge Success National, and what they have said is that the rationale could be that students just don't have enough time, and they're just working as hard as they can to get the work done. So they can't take time to experience the joy or the fun or the value, or recognize the value or usefulness of it. So it really is just a matter of the slog. But that is an area of note that we might want to focus on. And the next area is around sleep. An important piece of context here about sleep is that sleep has not been a target area for challenge success ever since the later start times proposal was put on hold several years ago. So at this point, the sleep statistics have basically stayed the same. Dover-Sherborn students reported getting 6 3/4 hours of sleep per night on average, and that's basically the exact same levels in 2014. So it hasn't eaten up to the 100th decimal point. It is the good news is we are slightly higher than the national sample, which is unbelievable. So nationally, the average is 6.5 hours of sleep per night, and we're very comparable to similar profile schools. The research, as some of you may know, recommends 8 to 10 hours. The ideal target sleep range sleep profile is 9.25 hours per night. So you can see that we're well below the target number. A side note of interest is just, I thought was interesting, 45% of Dover-Sherborn students report going to bed after 11 p.m. So that's almost half of students are going to bed after, this is high school, after 11 o'clock. And that may, have some implications for the later start times discussion. The next area is parent expectations. From the very beginning, parents have been key partners and stakeholders in challenge success, and the programming, much of the programming has been targeted for this group. Support coming from home is key to the success of this initiative. Students' perception of their ability to meet their parents' expectation has actually improved over the 3 years, so this is one of the indicators where how well the students feel that they're meeting their parents' expectations, and that has improved in our district, which is great. Also, the students feel that the performance goals that their parents have for them have decreased, which sounds like it would be a negative, but actually performance goals are based on comparisons. There are things like wanting their child to be the best at everything, do very well compared to others, and have an extreme worry about getting bad grades. So it's very comparison-based, competition-based versus more collaborative. So basically the message is that the parent programming has been effective in shifting parent behavior to some degree and really letting up the gas pedal on the pressure to the students. The next category is student health and wellness. And overall, the survey has 8 indicators of physical health that it looks at. Over the 3-year period, our students improved on 5 out of the 8 categories: exhaustion, weight gain, weight loss, difficulty sleeping, difficulty breathing. All of those things improved. 3 of the 8 categories worsened, which is sweating, headaches, stomach problems. That said, most of these indicators did not change more than 2 to 3 percentage points. So they were very minor changes. You could even, question how statistically significant it is. Except for exhaustion. Exhaustion improved 5 percentage points, which certainly was significant. Even though they're not changing their sleep amounts, they're not as exhausted for whatever reason. And even more significant, though, in terms of this area of physical student health and wellness, was the fact that 45% of students reported missing more than 1 day of school in the past month due to a stress-related health or emotional problem. And that number is up from 41% in 2014. This is concerning both in terms of its trend increase and its absolute value. It also is a little bit concerning because it's relatively high compared to national. We have 45% of our students who are missing a day of school, whereas nationally it's 38%, so it's 7 percentage points higher. Some of the profile schools have a similar range, but we're still on the high end. So that's an area that we may want to process a bit more about why that's happening. Could be some people have theorized that the fact that challenge success exists allows students to have a little bit of a release valve, and if they need to take time off, that they feel comfortable in doing so. So that's not necessarily a negative outcome, but I think it needs a little bit more exploration to figure out what's going on behind that number. So there's 6 major takeaways then in my summary. First, a high priority to keep working to further decrease the levels of student stress and academic worry, given that's the predominant overarching goal of challenge success. Second is that to recognize that recognizing that student perception of changes in the homework have been very positive, we should continue focusing on the quality, meaning, purpose of homework, and also take a look at the workload. Since it sounds like, coming from students, it still feels pretty significant and weighted to them. Third, to work to sustain the strong levels of teacher care and support that we see in place, which is fabulous. We rate fairly high in that category. But also to consider how we might ensure that a higher percentage of students have at least one adult in the school they can go to if they have problems, and so that they feel connected. Fourth, I would hope that we could support and work to further increase the number of students who are purposely and fully engaged, and also find a way to reduce that percentage of students who are just doing school by both managing the workload as well as managing the extra demands on these students' time. Fifth, the fifth takeaway, give attention and focus to the issue of sleep and strive to positively increase the amount of sleep that DS students are averaging per night. And six, to monitor the physical symptoms of stress as part of our ongoing promotion of student health and wellness, but also to further explore that concerning trend that I mentioned, that a greater number of students are missing more than one day of school in the past month due to stress or emotional problems.
Thank you. I would imagine some people have some questions about that. That was great.
I do, sorry.
Oh,
There's all
well,
the
I'm
time.
sorry.
I have a couple of things. First, just a really quick comment. Notice when you said the 40% were just slogging, and you surmise it's because they're too busy. Have you thought about perhaps it's that the teachers are feeling too busy and too much pressure, so they don't have, or feel that they have the time to infuse some excitement and be able to go off topic? And so that's some of the cause of the feeling of slogging too?
Yeah,
That's
certainly
just-
could be. Yep, absolutely. It'd
Just
be
sort of
something
throwing
for us
that
to
out
look at. Yep.
there as something.
Sure.
And I feel like that also works in with the teacher stress. It all works together, which is nice. I didn't quite hear if there was, if you're looking towards what to do to help increase buy-in from the teachers who are resistant. I think so many of the teachers are awesome, and they totally have embraced challenge success, but certainly some have not. And it seems to, and I feel like there's a lot of sort of, it happens also with the parents, that there's a lot of sort of preaching to the choir, or if you say, here's a PD, or here's an evening, come, and the people who come are those who already feel that way. So what's being done to look to try to bring along those who may not self-select?
I can speak to the faculty. So one of the things that has come out of our larger challenge success team was a desire from the teachers to start formulating some of their own subgroups. So actually they've got 3 separate groups that are meeting to look at how we report grade information out, looking at the communication links between student, family, and home, and then also looking at just the general stress of workload. So we've actually got 3 subcommittees that have come out of this that teachers are then meeting. And the teachers that are running those meetings are teachers who have been trained by Challenge Success, right, the seminars. So they will then be reporting back their findings to us, and then we'll then be sort of compiling those. So the administrators' role with those is to take that feedback to see, where are we with that? Because one of the things that sometimes faculty will say to me is, John, can you balance the assemblies, can you balance the special events, can you balance the field trips, can you balance all those other things too, so that we do in fact have the appropriate time to provide the instruction, right? And that's the big dance I have to do every single year as an administrator. And we're cognizant of that, but we're also cognizant that these experiences outside the 4 walls of the classroom are incredibly enriching and are important. So knowing that they are both there, I think it's trying to find that happy balance. And I think if you've got some folks who are maybe a little more resistant to it, I think they are in that struggle between what is a healthy balance. And so that's what I'm working with those people on, to sort of showcase that, yes, we can do both. It's a challenge, and maybe in a given year, it's going to be a little bit more than this or a little bit more than that, but we're going to still ensure that we get there with our instructional practices, our assessments, and then these opportunities that our teachers present to the kids, that our administrators present. So that's just a little something that is taking place, because we do absolutely recognize that. And there have been some other things that I've just simply put into place, as has Scott and Barbara and Laura, that these are non-negotiables. So these are other things that we say, this is then going to happen. And one of the feedback pieces that we've been hearing from our seniors is really trying to identify another homework-free weekend, and to look at our schedule and our calendar well in advance, give teachers proper time so they can plan appropriately, but to give the students that time similar to what we do for the Thanksgiving break.
Thank you.
I can speak to the parent piece of it too, real quick. I have an advisory group of about 20 members who come together regularly and talk about that very issue about how do we make sure we are increasing our reach to the non-choir, the people who are not yet bought into the Challenge Success model. So we've tried a number of different things, different types of programming. We do a lot of different things, newsletters, small group discussions, speakers, parent-teacher forums, newsletters. We try to cover a wide range. Also, this year in particular, we've tried to diversify the speaker. We had John O'Sullivan, co-sponsored by Boosters, so that we were hoping to attract a little different audience in that way, which we did. Right now, we have an event going on with over 200 people there, which is fantastic. Lynn Lyons, a national expert on stress and anxiety. And I saw a lot of new faces. So it wasn't, I don't think we've analyzed it a little bit, looking at, I think in the beginning we had a lot of repeat customers, and I think now the word is spreading and we're getting a much broader audience. So we're averaging about 150 to 200 people at every event, which is great.
And I think that's another reason why our K-12 approach has been successful, because we're then bringing parents who are coming from the elementaries and middle schools from both communities. So it's not just parents who have high school students and it's a short 4-year window. Rather, it's a much longer opportunity for us to make substantial change.
Thank you.
Yes, Michael.
So first, I want to thank the broader team. I personally think that the program is absolutely game-changing and can be transformational. Also want to observe that there's really, I think, strong consistency with the strategic objectives. Every single one of them, perhaps with the exception of resource efficiency, and questioning whether in the long view there are opportunities to look at international models, national models that are quite different from what's done presently. Clearly there's some legal roadblocks to some sorts of models, but that there seem to be some real areas of kind of challenge success coming together with different educational models and melding it into some really exciting changes and productive changes. Question, I don't know, Pam, if you had access to sleep, international sleep averages from other countries with overall high-performing school systems.
I have not seen those in particular, I'm trying to think. I've just seen national statistics, both challenge success schools, but more broadly national. So I don't know international statistics, but I can certainly find out for you.
I think that may be interesting vis-a-vis the start times and workload and.
Also, Mr. Jeffrey, the academic excellence, looking at those models in other schools.
Absolutely,
and
yeah.
looking at their pieces. Ms. McCoy and I are actually doing some research this coming summer on some international schools and some of the things that they're doing. So we hope to expand those opportunities too.
Yes, Henry.
Sorry, are you done, Mike?
Yeah.
Just a quick observation on the studies and the improvement that is great. And as we've been doing, some of us focus more on the elementary school than some of the other areas. And the stuff that's being done at Pine Hill and Chickering will percolate up through the middle school and the high school. And it'll be interesting to see how these results continue to go, hopefully, in a certain direction. So as you continue to monitor these results and make modifications, it could even magnify that even more, which would be fantastic. I know Dr. Keogh's talked a little bit about, the one that I circled was having the one teacher to sort of to talk to, is I guess the way I would phrase it. And that's been important to you in some other positions in some other districts. And coming from someone who was very comfortable with teachers, thinking 28%, it's an improvement, but there's a lot of room there. I mean, I would think 100% would be a nice goal there, in my opinion. And then lastly, and maybe I just don't know the answer to this, but do we record the events? So if you're getting a lot of repeat attendees, and some of the people can't make it just due to schedules, is there replays that are posted on the website and stuff?
Yes, most of our speakers are videotaped if they allow us to do it. The only reason they wouldn't be is if the speaker themselves says no. So tonight's being videotaped, so you all can watch it later. She's fantastic, by the way. The first half an hour was just fabulous. She just talked about having anxiety is the #1 mental health disorder right now, and how prevalent it is, one in 8 students. So it's pretty shocking. So we do videotape and then we make them available. We send out a link online for people to access.
And so Pam, just for those listening, how does one get on that list if you're not a high school parent to receive the video?
I can add you. As a
Well,
special,
not just me, but just
Hearing it on TV tonight.
Well, possibly, for example, Laura sends out a weekly update to the elementary school parents. You just add that to the community.
There's one that goes out K through 12 to all
Okay,
parents.
all right.
Yeah, and to all staff as well. So there would just be people who are outside of the
Right, there might be
system.
residents who are.
Right, like if you're no
attention to
longer
our
a K
meetings,
through 12 parent, for
who would like
example,
to-
you might want to hear it.
Right,
Exactly.
right. So it's not like you have a website and there's a webinar I can click and watch.
No, and usually the speakers don't allow that. They only allow limited access for a month. It's usually 30 days. So we'll send out the link and I'll be live for that long. But we do have some past speakers who we have the DVDs or the flash drives with the presentation.
Adrian.
I just wanted to thank you all very much, not only for the rigor in synthesizing the survey results, but for the work over the last 3 years. It's really inspirational. I have one question, just with elementary school and maybe middle school hats on. Are there any thoughts in future years of adding some survey or measuring component to the experience of those children? I know this seems a huge amount of work. I'm not trying to quadruple your work.
There is a middle school survey, and we are working on compiling the results of that now. It's not the same survey as the Stanford survey, but one of the statisticians at Stanford kind of made it for us, and it's in a SurveyMonkey format, so it's a little bit different, so we'll be working on that in the coming months.
Our elementary schools do a connectedness survey with students 3, 4, and 5, but with our assistant superintendent, we're talking about growing some of the questions on our student feedback tool to our teachers that include perceptions around wellness and care.
Sure. Brilliant. Thank you very much. And again, congratulations and thank you.
Okay. I was going to say, I've got a couple questions, but anybody else? Well, no, I want to be the last one.
Final word. You probably already anticipated my questions.
Oh, okay.
I have a quick one then if you want to be last.
Okay. Yeah.
This is great, and like everybody said, I appreciate it a lot. And you mentioned there's a bigger report. Will we have access to see more details?
Well, it's certainly something we can share with the superintendent, and I don't see why not. We felt like for tonight, the executive summary made the most sense. We can certainly distribute that to the superintendent, the assistant superintendent, and
I do think that sometimes without proper contextual information, that data can be misconstrued. That's the problem with giving the entire report. I totally get that some people will read it and see it exactly the way it's supposed to be seen, but others may not. So I think that's why systems typically don't necessarily do that, and instead do a kind of a condensed version.
So, Andrew, what we've sort of done with information like that in the past is it might be available at the admin building, and if you
Right.
want to go
Right.
read it.
Yes.
Like the budget.
Yes.
Any other questions? Okay.
So, well, I'll let Claire get in.
Well, no, I just had one comment on the slogging through comment, just as I sat here listening, and I'm thinking, in my mind, that's sort of also tied to finding your passion and what do you like, and is it, some of us sit here thinking, oh, that's a negative thing, but sometimes it might be a student on the other end of the spectrum who's just sitting there bored all day. Not in the right level and right class, and I just didn't know, is that part of that sphere of looking at?
Yeah,
What
certainly.
is a hard slog?
Yeah, it certainly could be, and that would be something that, through our guidance department, for us to examine and look at and say, okay, let's examine, a number of our schedules and kind of see where are our kids moving towards. I mean, here at Dover-Sherborn, we do know that there's a great interest in students trying to develop in science. Many kids want to take as many fine and performing arts courses as they can as well. So it may also then ask us questions of, okay, how do we then create more flexibility within our current schedule to allow for more of these things, and then perhaps that can correlate it to lower numbers of kids who feel as though they're just slogging through.
And that's the project-based learning and personalization from their space acronym comes in, that's the P. So I think it's both a broad picture of what courses they take, but also
Right.
within the courses, how they get an opportunity to dig in and find their curiosities and go deep in those areas.
Okay. All right, okay, I'll ask. If you don't want to ask, you gonna ask?
Well, one of the things I was curious about, when I went to the
I have no idea what he's gonna ask.
multiple years ago by the chair of the program from Stanford, one of my takeaways was just the focus on kids being so very overscheduled. And it really, again, in communities like this, isn't the time that you're with the children each day, but it's everything else that gets added on after school and on the weekends, whether it's sports or Russian math program or some of those things. Where do you feel we are as a community around that issue? And is that where some of the focus will go over the next few years?
Yeah, I think it's an area where, that we still need to continue to improve and work on, but I will say this, I feel as though the conversations are being had though, I really do. I feel that between all the parent seminars, we've actually had a number of faculty-parent meetings as well, and those have been really effective in sort of, giving information on both ends of what we're seeing, what parents are seeing, so that we can kind of come to, all right, what's really happening? Your children are reporting this, and when our children are reporting this, what's really going on? But I do think that's going to be an important piece moving ahead. Ellen and her guidance department do a really nice job when they do course selection. They also do this time utilization form. And we really try to harp on that it's not just the courses you're taking, because for many of our kids, handling those courses individually, not a problem. Even collectively, not a problem. But then on top of that, what else do you do? You're also a captain on the field hockey team. You're also the head of NHS. You're also this and that. And then, so there are those other requirements. So, that's probably going to be the ultimate success of this program for us as a community, is to try to find where that happy balance is. And the reality is some kids can take on more than other kids at this age. And it doesn't mean that some kids won't eventually or can't. So it's trying to find that fit, and I think that when we have them take their course selection and we talk about the different things they want to do, we have actually seen some kids make some choices with regard to their academics, or saying senior year, you know what, I've decided I'm going to go and play a different sport. I'm going to go out for cross country instead of soccer because of the time limit, or I'm going to focus on this. And as long as they're happy with that decision and they work with their parents, I think that's a great decision. So I think that's really the self-advocacy of the older students as they become young men and women, that we really do want to see them start to take some of those steps.
And down more in the middle school years, where there's, quite often multiple sports going on, or even as early as, 4th and 5th grade. I think that's where some of my concerns are, that some of these kids are not having the opportunity to just be kids in an unstructured setting. And maybe when I heard her talk to us a couple of years back, she was preaching to the choir, and so I locked in on that. Also in the last month, the most recent Metro West Health Survey results were at least shared to the regional school committee. I'm still struck by the levels of kids reporting bullying. How does bullying fit into what challenge success looks at, or do you see that as completely independent? It certainly falls into under our strategic plans around, health and wellness.
Yeah, I think it certainly does play a role, because once again, we're defining success, and, what does that then mean, and, what does that cause some kids to do to others as a result of the competition within courses, teams, etc. It is interesting, we always ask a question at the senior exit survey about social exclusion and social aggression, and they always say the same thing, and they'll say, the freshman and sophomore years, we definitely saw more of it. We saw students trying to find their groups and who they were going to be with. And then junior year, they start to form them, and then by senior year, they just figure, well, we're all seniors, we're all in this together. And they all claim that as seniors, they get along really well. They kind of just let their guard down. So that's something that we, as a high school, and like most high schools, we do struggle with, and that's working with them as they transition, trying to help students, recognize and not get so caught up in the comparison to one another and their peers. It's hard, though. That is hard, because they see that, and they want to fit in, and as a young teen, fitting in is so important. So for us, that's a big challenge. It is a big challenge. And, what they'll say is, over time, they kind of just let their guard down and then just say, respect each other for who they are as they become seniors, and then they go off. So we're happy about that. But what we're not pleased with is that they feel this intense competition amongst themselves as they come in as ninth graders.
Scott, do you have any comments as it relates to the middle school, where some of the percentages are even higher, at least with what I read from Metro West?
Our kids are at this age, they're just trying to find themselves. They're trying to figure out who and what they are, and trying to fit into different groups, which, you see them evolve just from the time they came in sixth grade, and you see students in the eighth grade who have distanced themselves from some of those groups that they had started out with. So there is growth, but they're just trying to figure out who and what they are, and we're trying to help them in that process.
All right.
One comment, I had a conversation with a parent who's not here, but raising kids in Maryland, and just gone through a very painful process of getting their kids, college. And when I told her, I said, we don't publish forced rankings, she, like, her eyes opened. She thought that was, would be a huge positive impact. So I do want to that's something that predated challenge success, but I think that's something we should all acknowledge, that's helpful. And then the other thing, when we were down at University of Richmond on Parents Weekend, they talked about one of their priorities is resilience in their students. And so I mentioned to the dean that was taking on that effort, are you A, aware of challenge success? And B, what are universities doing to help high schools create more resilient kids? Because I think, again, so much of this goes back to the meat grinder of college acceptance and where the right place is, and what pressures that puts on kids that right now we're still pretty limited about what we can do. And again, I think that's something we have to live with, and we're doing some very good things, but there's some aspect of that just seems to need to be brought into this as an overall part of the equation. I agree.
Challenge Success National is also working with college admissions across the country.
No, but I think that's it's good to hear that they're being supported to bring that message, and if there's a way that they need more support. Again, I don't think they need to get out of some of this grind that the kids are in. We can move the process. And then they complain about being not resilient when they get,
So if people have more specific questions, Pam, can I say call you, or if there's some detail that we're not covered, is it okay to call you, or how should committee members find out more?
In terms of like specific data, Mr. Garland?
Yeah, or just understand maybe the difference or the transition from elementary to middle to high, or how, that type of thing, or just have questions about
Yeah, my
more detail.
recommendation would be for any programs or anything that's happening, would be to have them contact their building-based administrator.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
In each building. And then in terms of some specifics, they could certainly also contact me, and then I could probably filter some things through
Okay.
Pam, just
All right.
because I don't want to
Okay.
inundate her.
And forgive me,
She's not an employee.
I do, well, right. I do have a couple questions, quick questions. So the first thing that was mentioned, the overall level of stress and academic worry, was that a number that went from 78 to 72, or?
That was a big piece of it, yes.
Okay, so it's never going to be zero, and we may compare favorably. So what would a goal be? I mean, 50, or I mean, how do you know what to shoot for?
Right, so there's two pieces to that. So the one percentage that you're quoting is the percentage of students who reported being always or often stressed by schoolwork. That went down from 78 to 72.
So that means 78% of the kids are always stressed, always or often stressed.
Are often, yes. They're reporting themselves, yes. We're high. We rank high in this category, which is why we introduced challenge success.
So what's the average, or what's normal?
I don't have comps on that particular one. I am guessing I know we're ranked fairly high, so I'm thinking it's in this 50 to 60% range.
But it'd be a mistake to assume that all the schools, the 150 schools or however many that's in it, are all high performing, right? I mean, they're not all necessarily high performing, or are they?
No. I mean, a majority are a fairly similar profile to what we
Okay.
have. Which is, they have some
In terms of
degree success,
outcomes.
which is why they're coming
Okay.
on board with the program to begin with. In terms of the comparables that they pulled out to certain measures, not that particular measure, but other ones, they tried to do schools that were very similar profile to ours.
Okay. The other, I assume the sleep number is as questionable, I guess, as the homework number in terms of accuracy to some degree. I've always had an issue with DRs with my own kids, because I would contend that, no, we're not, I would contend that that's time in the school, up to 4 periods in one term for my daughter. It's time that we really don't know what the kids are doing. It could be sleep, it could be social, it could be homework, it could be a number of different things. So I wonder if that homework number is 2.7, if we assume that all our kids are doing homework during DRs, then the actual number would be much higher, right? I mean, if they're doing homework. If it's social, that may be great downtime. Or I guess they could be sleeping. How is any of that? That's a lot of time for some kids. So how out of the day? So where does that fit in? Do you think if they're doing homework, that's in the 2.7 or 2.85?
I don't believe so, because I think the question is worded as, what do you do on an average weeknight or weekend? There's two separate measures. So I'm guessing that they, in their minds, they take it very literally, right? So at night, it wouldn't count what's happening during the
I just
day.
think at some point, somehow, you need to account for how that time is spent. It just seems like it can be a lot of time out of the day, and maybe more for juniors and seniors than otherwise. That's important time that could be used for something, whether it's de-stressing in a particular way, or doing some of the homework or doing something. It just seems like that should be part of an understanding of what's going on, like a question of what do you do during your DR?
Yeah, I completely agree. We've changed sort of the environment of the library and that whole process. So the students who are in the library are doing academic work. You know, at one time when I first came here, it was a student union type of thing, and maybe that was good for some downtime, but unfortunately I think it was distracting to others, and it created a bit of a culture of just hang out. And I said to Paul Butterworth, we've got to change this, because we've got a number of kids who do want to use this to do real studying and research. So there's been a lot greater focus on that. We've realigned the library around so that it doesn't have that same configuration. Now, sometimes our students are seniors, only our seniors, can sign out during their open campus time, and then you're right, they could go home, they could sleep, they could go to Blue Moon and get a bagel, but we also feel like as seniors, we're teaching them the independent skills to manage, right? So that piece, but definitely for our younger students, we've also made changes to our DRs in terms of the DRs are silent DRs when they're in the classroom, and same with the library. So I will say, I think more students are taking advantage of that time, because I stress to them how important that is, especially when we look at that time utilization. I'll say, you're out of school at 2:15, maybe you then go on extra help, and then you go to practice for 2.5 hours. And then you're going home, you want to have dinner, you probably want to have some time with your family, and then you're going to start homework. We can't keep this up where you just keep, you can't do that every single night, so you're going to hit a wall. So we stress when we do our freshman meet and greets about taking advantage of those DR times and getting that work done, preparing that work. And we do actually have a lot of students who also take that time to meet with teachers. A lot of that is happening. And I know that was something that when I came in, I just said, this has got to change, because we are losing valuable time.
Okay, thank you. That's great. Thank you very much.
Mr. Garland, if I may, just one last thing. We were actually asked to host the first ever East Coast Conference for Challenge Success, and we accepted, obviously. We are going to be hosting May 4th and May 5th here at Dover-Sherborn, and I don't know how many schools, how many schools are attending?
10, maybe 10 to 15.
Yeah, from this area and some new schools. So we're really proud that they asked us, and I think it's a great way to showcase our district.
Sure. Thank you. All right, moving on. Item 4, the superintendent evaluation.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Timeline?
Timeline, all right. I will speak on behalf of the Superintendent Evaluation Subcommittee. This is a subcommittee comprised of the Union 50 reps, Adrian from Dover, Kate from Sherborn, and then the non-voting members, Ann, Hovey, and myself from the region. So you will get this memo tomorrow, so you don't have to take notes, but it was kind of evolving today, so I didn't have a chance to give you the final copy. But this will walk you through all of the points. So I just want to give you a few general thoughts. We use an instrument that was developed by the Department of Education, of Elementary and Secondary Education. It's summative of evaluation, and this is what you guys will get tomorrow. We have used this instrument once, and that was 4 years ago when we evaluated Steve Bliss. So we don't have a lot of institutional knowledge on the topic, but we have some. So we will do our best to help those of you who have not yet been through this the first time. It can be used both as a mid-cycle instrument as well as an end-of-year cycle. Given that we have a brand-new superintendent, it didn't really make sense to go through usage of this instrument at mid-cycle. We all got updates from Dr. Keogh during our meetings. We thought that was, excuse me, the right way to go for this year. Certainly something open for discussion for next year, especially once we all have some more comfort with this. It is, interestingly, and for any of you who have done evaluations in your professional lives, this is the most unusual situation because everything has to happen in public. So unlike a teacher, an educator evaluation or an employee evaluation, which you can do in private and talk through goals and give feedback, this all happens in public. So everything that we want to tell Dr. Keogh has to happen as a joint group, which is an interesting process, to say the least. The good thing is that this is really meant to be a feedback mechanism. We are going to give him thoughts. We're going to give him areas that we think are potential areas for improvement, things that might be informative, helpful. It does not affect his compensation because the contract that we signed with him last year is set. So this is not, there's nothing merit-based in his contract. And so this is really a qualitative feedback situation. as you go through this, our norm, as you guys know, is that most of the communication to the superintendent goes through the chairs of the committees. So there will be things on here that you might just have no data on because you just don't interact with the superintendent at that level, and that's okay. It's okay to leave things blank. It's okay to write NA on something if you don't feel like you have the data to answer that. Presumably, there'll be enough people among the 16 of us to provide it, and because it all rolls up into things, some of the details in the indicators don't really matter on a micro level. So how are we going to get this done? I think so today we're discussing the process, and I can answer any questions as can the rest of the folks on the subcommittee. Tomorrow, you're going to get via email 3 things. You're going to get this memo so that you didn't have to take notes. You will get this, the instrument in an editable PDF format. Cheryl has taken it from the DESE website and made it editable for everybody. You will have this exact same rubric or instrument populated with Dr. Keogh's goals. So he will have taken this and put his goals into it. And are you doing it as a self-evaluation too? Did you actually check the boxes?
I thought that the plan was I was actually going to self-evaluate myself across the board.
Perfect.
Not just the goals?
Yeah, and that's what I meant, yeah.
Okay.
So he'll populate with the goals and then self-evaluate so that you know kind of how he sees he's done against these different indicators. And then you'll also get a link to, on the DESE website, there's a whole, 17-page document on the rubric. Okay, maybe it's 35. I think I skimmed it. It's very in-depth. I think that a lot of this is pretty self-explanatory. I think the language they use in here is pretty straightforward, but if you have any questions, I think the most important thing to know is that it doesn't give you a lot of options. So on any of the indicators, you basically get to choose unsatisfactory, needs improvement, proficient, or exemplary. Those aren't very big, or I guess I should say they are very wide buckets, but they're not very many of them. And so I think the general sense from the rubric is that most superintendents will end up in the proficient category because they are doing their job. They might be exemplary in certain areas, and especially with a new superintendent, a needs improvement is not a bad grade. It's fine to be an area that, especially if you're getting used to a new district or a new role, that there's an indicator that is needs improvement, and that's fine. I think that's, to me, kind of the Reader's Digest of the rubric, but if you should certainly take a look at it and take out of it what is important to you. Here's the important thing. On Monday, April 23rd, or as close to the 23rd as you can get, we need 2 things. We need you to have gone through this PDF and actually marked what you think on each of these. And I encourage you to kind of read through it first. It's not the most logical in that you start reading and the first thing it says is, don't do this first, go do page 3 first. And then it says, then do page 4 through 7. And then you roll up to what's on the top. So kind of take a look through it and follow the directions. Because if you actually do follow the directions, it works. But it's not really intuitive, I think, the first time you look at it. So we need this completed back to your representative, your SESC representative. And the other thing we need is, as you'll notice at the end, there is a box at the end, or actually it's on page 2, but it's the end, which is your comments. This is where you get to say whatever you want to give to the superintendent individually. Because what we will do as a group on the 25th, which is why we need you to do it by the 23rd, is we will numerically take each of your boxes that are checked and assign a number to it. So unsatisfactory is 1, needs improvement is a 2, proficient is a 3, exemplary is a 4, and then average those without any discussion or deliberation on our part, purely numerically, where the 16 of us come out on each of these things. So that in the end, we can give him what is basically one number, which is why any of those little individual micro points will probably not roll up in the 16 of us. So we need those numbers. But the box of comments is where you get to say what you would like to say. Now you need to know 2 things. 1, what you send to us that would be in that box will A, go into a written document that will go to DESE, because this is your voice. This is,
No,
Just the ratings.
no.
sorry, the ratings go to
Ratings.
Desi, it's, sorry, it's a pen, it's,
You have to say that.
well, hang on, I'll get to that. So then, but the other thing is, you have to then, when we get back together on May 1st, you have to read those comments in our group in order for them to be part of the public record in the minutes that can then be referenced from the document that goes to Desi. So that, what you would put in that box, and I would strongly suggest that you keep it to 1 to 2 minutes in a read form, like read it out loud and see if you can actually keep it to a minute or two, because on May 1st, we're gonna all sit around and read our comments to Dr. Keough, which not only gives him a chance to hear what individually we say, but also then puts your comments on the record and in the minutes.
He's not going to see it otherwise.
If you would like him to, we can give him an individual report. It was our thinking that if we summarize all the numbers and we've each given him our qualitative summary comments at the end, that's a good amount of data. We weren't planning to give him. Now, having said that, Dr. Keough is open to, if anybody would like to, over the summer, sit down and spend time with him and go through your individual report and get into feedback in more depth. He's perfectly happy to do that. We're just trying to kind of keep the ball moving during the school year. So what that summarizes to is, so on the 23rd, we need 2 things. We need your populated report and we need your comments. And then you will then read those. I mean, all I'm going to do is put them into a document so that they can be given put in the minutes on the day of the meeting. So I guess technically you don't have to get those to me on the 23rd. So it would be good, because then otherwise we're not chasing people. But that's what you're going to say out loud.
If they're not done
Correct. If they're not
the
done.
only thing that can go in, and this is a whole open meeting law thing, is you have to have said it out loud at the meeting.
At the
So if
meeting.
you're going to write something in there and not attend, it's not going to make the report.
Correct. So if you're not going to be there on the 1st, you need to have someone to read your comments into the record.
Someone else can do it
Which
for you.
we've done before.
Which we have done before, no problem. And then the minutes will literally just be a concatenation of each of our summaries that we've spoken out loud, which is all I'm saying is to send them to me so I can put it in one document and get it to Amy so that it's in the minutes.
But the whole point of that is it's a document that ends up at the state Board of Education.
Well, I mean, most importantly, you've spoken it out loud to not only Dr. Keough, your colleagues, anybody who's watching. It becomes your commentary on his evaluation, is most importantly. And then the second is, yes, it gets put into a document that goes to the state, so that we're all on the record in our own voices with no curating by any individual or any subgroup. Does that make sense? All right, so that's the timeline, and I definitely would encourage you to keep those comments to a minute or two, or it will get awfully long on May 1st. And then so our next joint meeting will be Tuesday, May 1st. We're gonna meet for an hour before the region is in session. So we're gonna meet from 6 to 7 on May 1st to have that public.
Or maybe
Do you have a different region meeting?
7
o'clock.
start.
Right.
Can someone decline to be in the meeting?
Then, yes, certainly. It's just then their comments won't be in the evaluation. Let's see. So, like I said, all of the instructions are in the rubric. I think everything else should be pretty self-explanatory. Any questions?
Can I just make a
Or did
quick
I miss
comment?
something? Yeah.
So the rubric for people who, especially if you're relatively new to school committee, or if you've not done this before and you first read through it, it's really intimidating. But take a moment and read through. But if you also don't understand what it's asking, that's when the link to the really lengthy document, believe it or not, they actually have explanations for each of the lines of the rubric. So you can go through and relatively easily find, and they explain what it means, what you could use as indicators.
Right.
And so that can be really helpful.
Can I add something to that? It's really important, I promise. It's really important that people have that option of looking at that, because you're right, those indicators are kind of broken down into layman's terms, but I really doubt, and this is one of the problems I've always had with this particular evaluation tool, I really doubt that all of you would be privy to all of that information. It's just,
Right.
it's a big ask.
Even the chairs.
And I think
Yeah.
that, so I think that your point about NA or not making a comment if you don't feel like it is, I think that should be considered fine.
Yep.
That doesn't mean we can't talk about it further, because we definitely could. And I love that idea of meeting in the summer if anyone wants to as a follow-up. It's a perfect idea.
Good point.
Even if we're off.
Even if you're up.
Why not?
Any other
I-
questions?
I had a quick question.
Yeah.
What is the style of the comments? Are they more casual? What's the
Last time we did
expectation?
it, they ranged from an overview, a couple of sentences to bullet points of, here are my big 4 takeaways as I was doing this evaluation that I want you to know.
So are there meeting minutes somewhere around that have that to refresh our memories?
Yeah, I mean, it should be, I have it,
'Cause
I can certainly send it to
4
you.
years ago, I can't remember.
Yeah, well, it's a different person.
We all know
a
how well
different-
that one went over. in the long
Yeah.
run.
Jen,
Okay, all right.
Jen reflected the style of the person.
Yeah, exactly.
Any other questions on the timeline?
Okay.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Item 5, the consent agenda, which is just the minutes. Did anybody have any changes to the minutes from January 16th? Good, all right.
I'll invite a motion at the region to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Second.
We'll invite a motion at the Dover School Committee to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Thank you, Henry, thank you, Rachel.
Okay, Sherburne?
So moved.
Second? Second. Good, all right.
Call for a vote at the region, please. Those in favor? Aye. Motion carries.
Chickering?
Those in favour?
I'm in favor.
Sherburne? All in favor? Aye. Yes, opposed? Nobody? All right. We got communications, item 6, the tech FY19 budget proposal.
No
Pardon?
expectation of a vote or anything like that. Tech asks that their sending districts have a look at that budget, that's all.
Sure, so for your reading pleasure. All right, so I guess we will poll to exit regular session and go into executive session, not to return. Can we do that as
For
just
the-
a big group?
Yes, to
Okay.
discuss
Oh.
the deployment of security personnel and devices or strategies with respect thereto, and to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining and employee benefits, not to return to open session, but the regional school committee may very briefly open session.
Oh, wow, okay, so polling, Henry? Good. Jess?
Yes.
I need a voice, I need a voice.
Yeah, voice
Yes.
too? Yes.
Yes, yes.
Rachel?
That's just
Yes.
a-
Okay, yes, yes.
Raise the
Michael?
hand.
Yes.
Yes. Scott? Michael?
Yes.
Ann? Lori, God, this is painful, all right. Okay, we're in executive session. Thank you all for coming.